John was visiting me at Facebook, and he's like, oh, I thought you were committing career suicide.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? It's a podcast about graphic designers and the weird, wild, wonderful, and downright blunderful mistakes we make on our way to making just about anything at all, because it's all part of the process. I'm Sean Schumacher, and joining me today, a very special guest, a powerhouse designer who's done a bit of everything, from screen printing to digital and back again. He started the Analog Research Laboratory, an internal print studio and residency within Facebook that has had more than a few design legends, not to mention friends of the show, pass through its halls. These days, he runs the design studio Nonlinear here in Portland. It's been Barry Hyman!
Hello.
So great to have you here.
I feel like in that moment, I felt like Corbin Dallas in The Fifth Element. It's that amazing scene. Yeah.
Well, I think, unfortunately, things are about to get more sort of hyper surreal, futuristic, because it is time for America's favorite game show. That's right. Is it food? That is, of course, our theme song. Is It Food is, of course, the game show that is inspired by the thing that every kid notices, that Windex and Blue Gatorade are the same color. Except, in our case, the companies involved have taken that to the extreme by then deciding to put a drinking straw on the Windex bottle and slapping both their brand names on it. Even worse, a lot of these are for children who are notably not good at judging that sort of thing. My for instance that I noted down here is, as my mom tells me frequently, when I was 4, ate a lot of gum off the sidewalk.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you're wondering what young Sean was up to, listeners, bad news. Doing some of the nastiest business that I could think of. So are you ready for our first gentle introduction to this incredible game?
Let's do it.
Our first collab is Dunkin' and Native. And to give you a hint, the product in question has a donut printed on the packaging. Let's explore our companies, shall we? Native, of course, works primarily in the skin and body care world. And Dunkin', meanwhile, has arguably made edible products for the past 75 years. Dunkin', America runs on them, which honestly kind of explains a lot about what's going on right now. So what do you think? This Dunkin' and Native collaboration, is it going to be food?
I know that Dunkin' is like a big thing in like the Northeast, but wasn't really a thing in Texas or really California.
Yeah, they're highly regionalized.
Yeah.
They're also not good. I hate to break it to the Northeast, where they are beloved.
I'm sure I've like gone into one at some point, but not very familiar with that brand, and not familiar at all with Native. So like I have no idea what they would be doing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say though, like if it's like is it like makeup? Like skin, like
that's a very good guess. I'm actually going to show you a picture which may or may not actually clarify things for you. So this is and to give the listeners a sense of what this is, it is Boston cream flavored. There is a Boston cream donut on the packaging. And it, in this image, is being inserted into a box of donuts.
Yeah, that's very misleading.
Yeah, it's dye-free, though.
Because like initially it's like, okay, it's a box of donuts, but like, okay, no, there's a bottle of body wash.
You cracked the code. Yes, indeed, it is body wash. Native, I gotta say, Native has been on my radar for a long time because they are really going harder into the body washes that look like they are meant to taste like food in addition to just smelling like food. Like they have a collaboration with Girl Scout cookies. That it feels like someone from the Girl Scout cookies organization should have been like, I don't think so. But I think this one is maybe even worse because there's a name that you see first on this packaging, and it is not Native's name. It's Dunkin's name.
Yeah. It looks like, okay, maybe it's like something you drizzle on your ice cream. Right?
Yeah. Like Native is actually sandwiched in between the two halves of the Boston cream donut on here. The liquid that comes out is going to look like a Boston cream donut cream. I just don't know how any of this happened. But that's our exciting first round of Is It Food? Okay, are you ready for round two? Okay. This is actually a visual one, so I'm going to get a product out of our secret box here. Now I'm going to set it in front of you.
Okay.
So
It looks like, the kind of stuff that you would put in like an Easter egg basket, or maybe like the stuff that would, whatever you call it, that go like the plastic stuff that goes on like a weed eater.
Oh, absolutely. I think it bears a striking similarity to both of those things. This is, I'll tell you enough that it is in fact meant to be Easter grass.
Okay.
Easter grass traditionally not edible,
Okay.
made out of basically the same plastic that goes into those weed eater sort of whipping around plastic things. And it does really look a lot more like that than it does like Easter grass.
Yeah. It's the color is what's given me the Easter grass.
Yeah, it does.
vibe.
It's sort of a warning color, as if like to try to communicate to people that it is extremely dangerous when it whips around. You've actually managed to break off some of it. We got a sniff from Ben. Ben's giving it a sniff.
I don't know. I can't tell if it feels like plastic,
It does feel like plastic. I was
but
astonished.
I could see it being like some kind of edible something. But I have no idea.
Yeah. Do you want to take a guess?
I mean, I don't know. It feels like it's like a trick question. So I'm gonna say that it's edible.
You are in fact correct. It is edible. This is an incredible product that I got at Walmart. Walmart, no problems there. Edible grass, green apple flavored. I've handed the original packaging to Ben. So this is, what children on Easter morning probably got in their baskets to cradle their $11 eggs that they've, sort of rooted around in the dirt of their parents' backyard for. And I have so many questions about why this product exists. Because in all my years of being a child, I was never once tempted to eat the grass that the nasty dirt eggs came from. No. So who's this for?
I feel like there's probably a whole Pinterest board.
Oh, sure.
Of inspiration for how you could use this stuff.
I mean, they are trying desperately on this packaging to give you multiple ideas. You could build a little bird's nest on a cupcake.
Top it. Great for baskets.
Great for baskets. It is surprisingly low calorie, too, which I can't quite figure out either, because it does appear to be made entirely out of sugar.
Yeah, this whole bag, which I don't know if this would do like one small basket.
Oh, yeah.
But it's only 100 calories.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you're looking for a healthy snack that will just make all the people around you worry for your safety, this is a great option. Again, shout out to Walmart.
But what is like total fat 0. Total sodium 0, daily. This is the daily percentage value. Total fat 0, sodium 0, carbohydrate 9%, protein 0. What is
it made out? What could be in it?
It doesn't list ingredients.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is it I think it's printed here, but I can't really read that.
Yeah, I believe there's probably some intentionality behind that choice.
Yeah, it's like black ink on clear.
Right in the shadow of the center.
Potato starch.
Potato starch.
Corn starch.
Delicious starches. I'm actually I think you've inspired me. I'm going to break off a piece of this Kit Kat bar and give it a try. Oh, the chew's bad. It doesn't really break apart in your mouth, which is sort of a thing that you want your food to do.
By edible, they mean you probably won't die.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of in the same way that, when you get that little play set from Play-Doh where you can sort of make the McDonald's burgers. Just in case those are non-toxic, but they really don't want you biting into them. It's really unpleasant. There's an amount of sugariness to it that I really hate, I think, because it is like eating a blade of grass, and then you just get a sugar explosion.
It does have that green apple, chemically candy taste.
Like somebody stretched out a Jolly Rancher to infinity.
It does. If you just kind of let it sit on your tongue, it kind of just dissolves.
So basically they used the same technology that they used to use for those Listerine breath strips to make this awful product. Are you ready for our final question?
Yeah.
Our final question, this is worth all the points. It is a collaboration by Peeps and Little Kids. Don't know if that's a company. Don't know if that's just the idea of Little Kids, but they're on the package. And the product in question is, of course, Peeps Grow a Peep. Peeps Grow a Peep. Is it food?
I'm going to say yes.
I'm even going to show you Peeps Grow a Peep. Is it food? Don't look at the back is my only advice.
I'm going to say no. Is it one of those like foam, like I remember when I was a kid, there were like these little capsules and you'd put them in the water and it would dissolve and it'd be like a little like foam.
Oh, absolutely. The dinosaur capsules.
Yeah.
I don't quite know if I'm being honest.
I feel like this is either like that or maybe it's like an edible version of that type of thing.
Yeah.
I can't from the front of the packaging, it says it's a choking hazard. So there's that. And it says...
Then again, that could go either way, because I'm pretty sure this stuff is a choking hazard, too.
It says, place in water, bunny or chick hatches.
Okay.
Grows over 3x its size.
So that's quite a bit of value when you get right down to it.
Yeah.
It could be that Peeps is trying to really support the children.
But it's like in a plastic egg, like one of those Kinder Egg type things. It seems like
there is a little bit of a blind box aspect to this where you don't know whether you're going to get a chicken or a rabbit. You've even rolled it over, and I'm curious how long it will take you to get the answer to this question, because it took me a lot longer than it should have when I spotted this in Winco.
I mean, at the top, it does say, this is not a food product.
Hey, there we have our answer.
Do not eat.
In what I would generously say is 8-point type.
Yeah, it's not the smallest type on there, but it's close.
It's also a distinctly different style than the rest of the type, which suggests that maybe this product got quite far in its development before someone realized.
But it's got all these like illustrations on the back that definitely make it look like it's like a cooking type thing.
Oh, yes. And the main name that is on this is Peeps, a known food product.
Yeah.
The Little Kids, you have to dig into the copy on the back to even know that they're a collaborator, that this is really their thing.
But it does conform to ASTM safety standards.
Well, I'm reassured now, because I was that ASTM has my back, lets me know that this is not going to poison me, probably unless they're a bad organization that I just don't know about. Yeah, that is so that is our final question on Is It Food? I think you won.
I think I failed that one.
Well, you passed the ultimate test, which was reading the packaging, which, again, it took me a lot longer to do just because I was so baffled by this product when I was waiting to check out. So please, companies, distinguish whether your product is food or not a little bit more clearly, especially
if it's targeted at kids.
Yeah. Like what? This is the other thing that gets me about this. A little kid is going to get this as just the egg.
Yeah, it's going to be in their Easter basket with their edible, apple grass.
You can't eat the thing that says Peeps and looks like a peep. You can eat the grass, though, which has traditionally been a really highly toxic form of plastic that is like designed to strangle sea turtles or something. Like, what's going on? How did we get here?
Synergy. Brand synergy.
Oh, thank you, brands. I'm so glad that you're all collaborating and making these incredible curse things. But Ben, you didn't come here to talk about things that are or are not food. You came here to talk about sort of your journey through design. And we were talking earlier, you kind of had some very early exposure to design tools like at your dad's office.
Well, I mean, one of the stories that I always kind of tell is like, pre-kindergarten age, I remember my mom telling, me the story of like when her family got their very first television.
Oh, really?
And, she was probably like, I don't know how old she was, like 5 to 10 years old at the time. And I just remember thinking like, oh, how amazing would it have been to be around when television was brand new.
Oh, yeah.
And being like bummed out because, you know, in my little child brain, I was like, television was the coolest thing ever. And there is like, you know, and so I was just like, wow, like, I was like, oh, like nothing that cool will ever be invented in my lifetime. I live in like the boring times of, you know, humanity.
Yeah.
And
we're never going to do better than that.
Yeah. You know, I couldn't, you know, I'm like, however young, you know, really young. And like, I couldn't conceive of anything cooler than television. And so that was like one of those earliest sort of like thoughts. And then my dad, you know, both my parents are retired now, but he was the city planner for like the town that I grew up in. And so they had computers pretty early on in their offices.
Oh, yeah.
And so I remember, you know, on like a 286 or 380, probably 386, I can't remember, you know, like
something with a turbo button.
Yeah. You know, Windows, you know, probably 3.0, you know, using Microsoft Paint.
Oh, sure.
And I remember at his office and then every time I would go visit him at his office, it was like, Dad, can I use, you know, the Paint thing?
Yeah.
And in my head, it was like, I'm drawing pictures on the TV. and so like that was like, I was just obsessed with that. I loved to draw, you know, as a kid anyway.
Yeah.
But like, there was just the computer, drawing on the computer was always like so much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
So when we finally got a 486, you know, computer, probably when I was in, I don't know, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, somewhere around there at home, you know, that was like, I was obsessed with that. You know, one of the very first like design commissions that I ever did was creating an illustration for my brother's birthday invitation in Microsoft Paint. It was an illustration of a Power Ranger because he wanted a Power Ranger themed birthday.
Did he have a specific Ranger in mind?
Oh no, so it was he was the silver. This was I think they created a silver one. I was never into Power Rangers really, but like they introduced one that was similar to the one that we had created for that card.
Oh, weird.
After we created the card.
Weird.
But that was like what I sort of consider my very first ever, like, you know, where I was asked to like create something, and it was Microsoft Paint. I quickly, you know, like I then became obsessed with kid pics.
Oh, sure. Why wouldn't you?
I still have an idea that I've had for like 20 years now that like maybe I should try this with the AI coding things. Or if anyone is listening to this wants to take this idea, it's a free idea.
Oh, yeah.
I want to create a plugin for Photoshop that maps kid pics sound effects to Photoshop tools.
Yes. This is not a maybe, but a must. This must happen.
This just needs to exist in the world. And then Print Shop Deluxe.
Oh yeah.
Like I would make little business cards for myself. I had no use. There was no I didn't need a business card as a kid, but I just loved making them. So there was a lot of that stuff, but I didn't know that graphic design was a career. I didn't know it was a thing. You know, like I look back at my childhood and it's like, of course I ended up doing what I do, but like there wasn't anyone in my life or, you know, there was it just wasn't something that I was aware of. And so by like, you know, middle school, I was like, oh, I think I want to be an architect because I also loved playing with blocks and, you know, thinking about designing buildings and, you know.
Well, that makes such sense as a creative leap from like being around city planning stuff too. It's like, well, who are the creative people in this zone? It's architects, you know.
Yeah. So my high school actually had like all of these CAD classes.
Wow.
And so I took there were like 3 years of those. And then there was a handful of students in my year who had done that. Like, I think there were like 4 or 5 of us. And so our teacher then our senior year created this like special class where it was like an architecture internship. And like, you know, a couple afternoons a week, we would leave and we would each go to different local architects' offices.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was a really...
What a high school.
I am very, very thankful for that experience for numerous reasons. But one, it made me decide I didn't want to be an architect. Because...
better then than later on,
I
will say.
Yeah, I don't have the patience for it, but like... You know, I loved the creative aspect of it and just seeing the real world. You know, this was the architects that I interned for was a very small, It was one architect, a draftsman, and like a secretary. So it was a very small office. And above the barber shop that I had gone to my entire life.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. And, someone like an architect that was like friends with my dad, like in the Lions Club and stuff, so it was like, it was fairly small town, Texas. Anyway, just seeing, and most of what the work that architect did was, residential and like, some, school and church sort of additions, stuff like that. But just seeing like for a residential house project, like they would have to put together these, binders, these spec book binders of like every material safety data sheet for like all of the nails and the lumber and like the paint. And it was just like, I was like, oh my God, like, and just the tedious of like having to draw electrical plans and plumbing plans and like just the tedious of that because the tooling is so bad.
Yeah.
And still is, but that's a whole other.
Wow. Yeah.
So at the same time in high school, I think sophomore year, my uncle had a software company at the time. He gave me this hand-me-down computer that had Photoshop 5.0 on it.
Well.
And I had heard of Photoshop, and so I started like building websites. This is why when I was getting into building websites, Flash, Photoshop. So those sort of things were like existing side by side throughout my high school kind of experience.
Yeah.
So the first job that I ever had was as a high school student, and I worked for this local guy. So I grew up in Georgetown, Texas, and there's this big retirement community there called Sun City. And so the guy that I worked for lived in Sun City. He was a retired NASA engineer. He had designed or helped design the radar system for the lunar lander that would ping the surface of the moon and then tell the lunar lander what their altitude was above the moon.
Holy hell, that's pretty important.
Yeah. So in retirement, he was bored. And so he started a company called Furry Feeder. And
okay.
And the website was furryfeeder.com. And he made automated pet feeders.
Now, okay. It's important for the listeners to know that doesn't mean what it means now then.
No, yeah.
So automated pet feeders, which actually that's a pretty early time for that too.
Yeah, this is like late 90s, early 2000, like 99, 2000.
Yeah,
so I helped design the website and shoot product photos, and he was just kind of a character, and I would go a few afternoons a week or whatever. And
how would you describe the aesthetic of furryfeeder.com?
Very pink.
Oh, wasn't expecting that.
And lots of pink and pink type.
Okay.
With some like sweet Photoshop effects.
Oh.
On the type. Like some like bevel and emboss and drop shadows. And,
gotta have some dimensionality for the furry feeders.
Very,
I keep saying it and it sounds worse
like kind of like a pink macOS Aqua, like vibe going on. Yeah. But the name now is
I think between that aesthetic and the name, I think Gen Z is going to eat that up.
So by the end of high school, when I was like deciding what I was going to like go try to study at college, I was like, well, I want to be a web designer, but you couldn't. I graduated high school in 2001.
Oh,
you couldn't major in web design really anywhere.
No.
And
there's probably 3,000 web designers who have that title on the planet at that point.
Yeah. And like there was the education system always lags behind. There's like the kind of cutting edge of like where technology is. So all the the web designers were mostly self-taught but I also knew that I didn't want to do computer science. The only class that I failed in high school was algebra.
Oh, yeah.
And so like I always felt bad at math. I never really liked math. Now I just believe like I just had, unfortunately, bad teachers, and like, because I've done so much stuff now with programming and had to like, relearn and sort of like, anyway, I'm like applying to colleges and end up going to the University of North Texas. And the major that, when I'm reading like the course book was like communication design, and they're talking about like designing logos and layouts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like that sounds like the kind of stuff that I enjoy about the web design, the aspects of the web design. My very first day of college, first class at 8 a.m. was the introductory course to that major. with my professor Eric Ligon, and it just kind of like opened my eyes to like, oh my God, there's this whole career, this whole sort of like universe of stuff that I feel like it just kind of clicked for me.
Yeah.
Well, so the other thing, so the way that major worked is you had to take the introductory course, and then every art student had to take some core art classes. And then you had to apply to get into the communication design major after you had done all those.
Sure, yeah.
Those classes. And theoretically, you should have been able to do all those classes within 1 year, 2 semesters. I was kind of a slacker in high school and like late to like signing up. So like I was already a semester behind because like the classes were full. And so it was 2 years into my college experience before I was able to apply to the communication design major.
Oh no!
And I was rejected.
Oh shit!
Yeah, which was devastating at the time, but I was just like, nope, this is what I'm doing, and so I just continued taking other classes for my minor and stuff like that through the next year, and reapplied and was accepted the second time.
Do you remember like I assume this is like a portfolio review. Do you remember any of the work that was in that first portfolio and what changed?
Oh yeah. Intimately. The entry portfolio was 2 drawings and in 2 pieces of like from the design. So you took in those like core art classes, you took drawing 1, drawing 2, and design 1 and design 2. But those design classes were not specifically graphic design. They were like, basic principles of design.
Oh, sure.
And every, nothing on the computer. It was all like hand, using acrylic paint and collage and stuff like that. And so it was 2 pieces that were kind of like from those classes, 2 pieces from their drawing classes. And then there was like you had to do an essay and in this like, how do I describe it? It was a 10 by 10, like sort of collage where it was a grid of, so you had to cut out these very precise squares and glue them up, and that was supposed to be related to your essay in some way. The second year they had slightly changed it, still 2 drawings, 2 pieces of design, an essay, but then the artwork that sort of accompanied the essay could be kind of whatever you wanted it to be.
That seems better because I, as an instructor, am even struggling to be like, there's only so many things you're going to be able to do with that square collage.
It was, I think that one of the things that they were looking for was just your craftsmanship.
Oh, sure.
They had very specific specifications for that. Like each square, I think, had to be like 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch.
Oh.
And, had to be glued up, and it had to be, on a 15 by 20, blackboard at a specific place. Like, so there were those kinds of things. But then obviously, and then like compositionally and kind of how it related to your essay and like what you, because you could like cut stuff out of magazines or whatever you wanted.
Yeah. I understood immediately when you said black mat board.
Yeah.
Like this.
I mean,
100%.
I don't know if this is still a thing with students, but like everything that we did in that major, like you had to, for the final presentation, it was all mounted on black mat board.
Yes. I mean, I was told as late as 2008 that you would never present any work to a client digitally. You would print it out and bring it in a stack of black mat boards and go through the mat boards. And I think even then I was like, that's not gonna last.
No.
And I think it had already gone from everywhere else by then.
I never did that professionally.
Yeah.
That was only in school.
You weren't presenting work at Facebook like that?
I am thankful to have had that experience and to like know how to properly use rubber cement and
absolutely.
And like stuff like that. Like I haven't had to use that skill in quite a while, but just, I think there is value to like knowing those kind of basic hand skills and like obsessing about that level of craftsmanship and how you put something together, how you present it. And even though I don't present work that way now, just that level of like obsessiveness about the details, I think does translate into like how you present work to clients.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like the other thing that is occurring to me too is like this is an opportunity to get students thinking about craft in the material sense too. And that is so much of, like we were talking, you brought in your 100 Patterns book, which is absolutely beautiful. It's all offset printed, but like you've also made such deliberate paper choices, and like that's all part of craft.
Yeah.
You got to know all the details of the material to make something really special.
And I think that that's true for any medium that you're going to work in. You know, it's like, I used to get this question a lot, 10, 15 years ago of like, do designers need to know how to code? And it's like, there's no like right or wrong way to answer that. Yeah. It's like, yes, it's helpful in the same way that like the way I was always kind of explain it is like, I don't need to know how to operate an offset press to design a book like this. But having experience with screen printing and letterpress helps me think about how to design for that medium. Yeah. I need to understand the technical constraints. I need to know about all the different processes of things that you can do to paper and different foil stamps or embossing or, offset versus like engraving versus that, like there's all these different things that you can do to the, atoms of paper or whatever you're printing on. Yeah. And if you don't have that specialized knowledge, your work is going to, be kind of bland in that physical space. And the same is true in the digital space. While you don't have to be, an engineer, you have to know the limitations of the medium in which you're designing. Yeah. And, so having, if you're able to code a little bit, like it's going to help you that much more in the same way that screen printing will help you design for offset. Yeah. And so you don't have to be the, the very best engineer, but yeah, it's just like having an understanding and knowledge of those constraints. Like limitations and opportunities too. Yeah. Because there are things that you just won't even think of until you know. And it's there's this little cheat I can do. And it is not totally the same, but like because digital technology has been evolving our entire lives, it continues to evolve, and so there are always opportunities to like kind of push at the edges of what is currently possible and into hopefully what will be possible in the future. Yeah. So you're now in the major. You're properly in. Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you. You're working as sort of a student in a like design context in another department too. Yeah, I worked at this. So this is I started college in 2001, and I guess would have gotten into the program in 2003 maybe. But starting in 2001 or early 2002, I can't remember exactly, I started working and worked at this department most of my time through college, which was the Center for Distributed Learning at the University of North Texas. And we designed online classes. Oh! So this is like early days of distributed learning. Yeah. And that was my job. I would design these like templates for this class. And this experience actually it was a great student job. Because it was very flexible, the hours. It was, building that was on campus, and ended up then recommending friends for other positions at there. So two of my roommates ended up working there with me. Hey. And they, I would do these like mock-ups for these sites. So it'd be like, okay, the nutrition professor wants to put her class online or whatever. And so I would do some, a masthead graphic and, different little icons for the buttons and stuff. And so I would do these in Photoshop, because that's what we used back then for designing for the web. And and then I would hand these off to there was a student employee who was like the developer, engineer who would then implement them into the thing. And I used to get into these. He was a friendly guy, and we would play racquetball together and stuff. But he and I used to get into these debate, arguments. Because I would hand stuff off to him, and it would the alignment would be off, and it just really frustrated me. Oh yeah, and kind of turned me off from designing for the web. It was my kind of first experience working with an engineer. Yeah, it also makes sense that would really frustrate you, being that they're trying to drill precision into you in the design program. Well, this kind of showed up. This is kind of jumping ahead now, but one of the very first projects that I did at Facebook. So I started working there in 2008 the sort of end of September, and so this is right before the Obama-McCain election. And so the first, week that I'm there, I ask my manager, and I'm like, hey, is Facebook doing anything around the election? It'd be cool if we could just remind people to go vote. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I don't know, like you should contact like our man in Washington. And Facebook had, the Washington D.C. office for Facebook at the time was, this one employee's office, or it was his apartment.
Not even an office.
No, yeah, he was working out of his office. It was one employee, and it was his apartment.
Wow.
And so, my manager, also named Ben, told me, he's like, yeah, his name's Adam. So like and so I look him up on sort of the internal version of Facebook, internal tool. This was before Facebook chat. Slack didn't exist. There was nothing like that. The thing that we used to communicate internally was AOL Instant Messenger. And so I look,
wow.
I pull up his AIM handle, and I send a message to Adam, and I'm like, hey, I'm a new designer, just started here, so and so told me to like talk to you. I'd love to like think about doing something for the election. So he was like, yeah, let's do it. So like we collaborated on this stuff. Created this page where you could find your polling location, created this little, what we called a megaphone, where you could like at the top of the feed, say like, hey, find your polling location. And then we made this button on election day that you could like click and just publish a post that said like, I voted.
Like the little sticker, but
it's like a digital version of the sticker, of like the I voted sticker.
That's great.
And
this is just you working with a guy in his apartment.
Yeah. And so Adam, like we kind of found some engineers to like kind of help us. And one of those engineers, his name was Joel, and he worked in the same building that I worked in, but like one floor below. So like he came up and found me, and he's like, hey, I'm going to like help you, build this. So he took, again, the Photoshop mock-ups that I had, and I handed it, we talked about like, he had some suggestions. I handed them off to Joel, within an afternoon or whatever, he sends me like a dev link, and it's like, and it's just pixel perfect. It's like exactly what I designed.
Oh.
And so I remember, the night of the election, like being in this bar. I had just moved across the country. I started working at this company, and Joel's there, and and I'm like, man, it was so great, like collaborating with you. It was such a so refreshing, that like you had great suggestions, great feedback, and like you implemented it exactly the way we talked about it. And I was just like, this is so great. And he just looked me dead in the eye, and he's just like, where the fuck do you think you are? Like, this is, and the level of like the people there at the time was just like, everyone was like bringing their A game, it was like, and I was just like, yeah, that's. So that was not my experience, though, working at this little department on campus where I was endlessly frustrated with this particular engineer.
Probably building a lot of things with tables and some
this is also the web was like, way less mature at that point too.
And also, the things that online courseware uses are just generally pretty bad. Apologies to all my students in online courses. I'm not in control of some of those things.
Yeah.
But that's an incredibly valuable experience to be having like right there at the start of your education too. At what point do you kind of start to like find the print side of your practice?
Yeah, so it's the screen printing thing. So, I had started to understand like people are making posters with screen printing, but I don't really understand how screen printing works at this point. I don't really know anything about it. I just know like it's a thing.
Yeah.
And, I find out that at UNT, there's an elective screen printing class that you can take.
Ooh. But
it's not part of the design department. It's part of the fibers and fashion school or something. But you could take it as a design major, as an elective. And so like, I think the second year or something, like I take this class, second year that I'm in the design program. So like my fourth year in college at this point. For those,
the numbers
for those keeping count. It took 6 years to get my undergrad. So I'm in this class with myself and my friend Courtney, who's also a design major. And we're the only design majors. Everyone else is like an art student or a fashion student or fibers art or whatever. Our teacher did not particularly like design majors.
I was worried that was where this was going, because that is there's certainly some folks in the printmaking world.
Some tension between sort of like the this pure this like pure artsy kind of world and like the commercial side of world. And so the first few assignments just like learning how to burn a screen and stuff like that, But then the final 2 assignments in the class are like, you can do whatever you want. I'm like, well, I want to do posters. The other thing is there's 1 exposure unit to burn the screens, and there are 2 washout booths in this class, and there's probably 20 to somewhere between 20 and 30 students in this class.
Jesus.
So like sometime, and it's like a I forget what they called it, but it was like, it met like twice a week, and it was like a 3-hour class. So it was like you're meant to be like working, doing, it's like a studio class. That's what they called it. And so like sometimes, there'd be a demo that the teacher would give and show us how to do some particular, like, here's how you burn a screen, or here's how you do this, or whatever. And so I would stay for those. I would watch those. But then, like, if there wasn't one of those, if it was just kind of like a work day, I would come, for attendance, and then I would like slip out the back. And because I was just like, this is just a complete waste of my time to be waiting in line to like use this equipment. I'll come in at night when there's 2 people here, and I'll do my work in peace. And so I always had my assignments in on time. I always did the work. But I get this email like midway through the semester from the professor saying like, hey, I've seen you like slipping out. Don't bother coming back. You're not going to pass.
Oh, shit.
And
wow.
And I was a little bit cockier in my younger days. And I was just like, I sent, some snarky email back, and I was just like, well, I'm only taking this because I want to like legitimately learn how to screen print. And like, I really don't care if I, pass or fail. Like, I want the knowledge. So I'm going to keep coming unless you're banning me from like coming into your class.
Wow. Okay.
And so the next class I show up, she takes attendance. She's like, I need to see you in my office. And like,
I bet.
I think what happened is I think she was on some committee with like one of my design professors, and my design professors, I think like, went to bat for me.
Oh.
My design professors liked me.
Good.
And anyway, so she's like, if you come to class for the rest of the semester, like, you'll pass. So I do that. So anyway, the final assignments, I do these 2 posters. The first one's a 3-color poster, edition of 10. The second one is a 8-color poster, edition of 15. I asked the teacher, before I do that, the first one, it's like, okay, no, I know people are like printing posters, with screen printing. How do they do it? And she's like, I don't know. Which I have to believe is just like her contempt for commercial screen printing.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to believe that she really didn't know. So I print these posters, these two different projects, without hinge clamps.
Oh, Registration was maybe not so great.
It is much better than you think it would be. No trapping either on my layers.
Really?
Eyeballing everything by hand, through the screen. And that's how I do my final two projects. One of the other stories that I'll tell about this class real quick is the final critique, for that final poster, the 8-color. Every student has to we all put up our work on the wall, and every student has to get up and present their work. And, there's me and my friend Courtney, who are the design students, and everyone else is like an art kid or art student or whatever.
Yeah.
And this one, so most people get up and they're like, yeah, I made this piece and it's about the tension between, man and nature, blah, some la-di-da-di bullshit. And, talking about what the concept is of their poster, or not poster, but their piece. And I get up and my presentation is it's this many colors, it's this size, it's on this paper. I say absolutely nothing about the image, the concept, anything about that. And I just remember this one art student guy gets up, sort of critiquing then my piece. And he talks for several minutes about all of the what he thinks the piece is communicating to him. And he's dead on. He's absolutely right about everything that, and then he's at the end of his critique, he's like, but I don't get anything more than that. And I'm just like, you motherfucker. I have distilled this complex, conceptual idea into an image that I have put on a 2-dimensional piece of paper, and I have successfully transmitted that idea from my brain to your brain, and that's not enough for you? What I just did is magic. you had to like sit here and try to explain your piece, and it still didn't make sense. Like, and so I
think you've uncovered the truth about art, which is that oftentimes it's the antagonism that is the point of it.
And I'm all for art that is like, I think that the best art helps you see things that you thought you knew from a new perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm all for art that is purely about form. But like, yeah, this was one of those experiences that
that's not the game you want to play.
Yeah.
Also, like that's not where you're at.
So where I really learned to screen print though was at my internship that summer after that class.
Oh, really?
Which was, so I had wanted to get an internship in New York that summer, and so I was like looking around and like kind of contacting some places. And I was chatting with this like friend of mine, that night, and he was like, "Why wouldn't you like stay in, Texas?" And I was just like, "Yeah, there's nowhere in Texas that I want to internship with, except maybe, this place called the Decoder Ring." And I had seen Christian Helms, one of the founders of Decoder Ring, speak at the DSVC student conference that semester or whatever. But he said, when he was speaking there, like we're not, they had just started. When he's like, we're not doing internships. They had on their website, we're not doing internships or whatever. But I knew like, because I had seen him speak, like that he had done an internship at Pentagram in New York, when he was a student. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just like hit him up, and say like, hey, I saw you speak. And like, I'm trying to get an internship in New York. Here's my website. Like, if there's anyone you can help connect me with, that would be amazing. And so I send that email, and I get a response from Christian. He's like, don't go to New York. Come intern for us.
Did he know at this point that you'd put together an 8-color print just by eyeballing it?
He did not. And Christian, so I go down there, to meet with them. They had already kind of like offered me the internship, but just I go to meet them. And so I meet with Christian and Paul and Darrett. And so I take them these posters as sort of a gift that I had done in this class. And I'm explaining to them like how I did them, knowing that they screen print a lot of, show posters and stuff. And I just remember Paul laughing at me and then just saying like, don't worry, we'll teach you how to print.
Oh.
And so that like, I really learned to screen print from Paul Fuchek, and who is a like legit master screen printer. That's where I really learned the practice of screen printing. At the end of my internship, they took me to lunch and they said like, hey, we're interested in like hiring you after you graduate.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, cool. And because I had a great time. It was an unpaid internship.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And but I was like, okay, that's cool.
But they like it and they want to put a ring on it.
Yeah. And towards the end of my final semester, or midway through my final semester, I hit up Christian. I'm like, hey, like if you guys are still serious about that, like we should start chatting because like I'm gonna need a job, coming up soon. And he's like, he responds, he's like, lets me know, he's like, hey, like we're not quite where we thought we would be, like financially. We're not gonna. And I was like, it was kind of. I wasn't really bummed. It was just like, I was like, okay, great. Like, that's the only thing I would stay in Texas for. So like, now I'm like, okay, I'm going to New York. I'm going to, Seattle. Like New York and Seattle were kind of like the two places that were primarily on my radar at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of like, all right, I'm like, I was excited for that sort of adventure. The same time, or that final semester, so Christian had participated as a student in this thing called Project M that John Bielenberg started.
Oh.
And so he had told me about that. And so if you're not familiar with Project M, John Bielenberg, who's this designer, started it in 2003 as a way to try to get young designers to think about how they could use their skills to address social issues. So like, and John was inspired specifically to start this by seeing a lecture by Sambo Mockbee, who was an architecture professor at the Rural Studio in Auburn, in Alabama, where he would take these young architects out into rural Alabama and they would do these like incredible design build projects. where there's no building codes. And so like, some of the houses like, use carpet tiles for, walls. And some are like these compressed cardboard hay bales and like really weird, kind of out there experimental architecture, but like beautiful. I mean, there's multiple books and, films and stuff about this program. So John was like, we need something like that for graphic design, and started Project M. Wow. So Christian is like, he was participated in it the first year. And so he's like, you should talk to John and you should really think about doing, applying for Project M. And so he had kind of like, introduced me to John over email. But at the time, this is kind of between that internship and my final, in my final semester or my final year at college, and the application window comes up. But Project M, if you applied and got accepted, there was a tuition fee of $2,000.
Ooh.
Which, at the time might as well have been, like $100,000 or $1 million. Like I didn't, I was a super broke college student. My internship was unpaid. And so I was just like, there's no way, I have student loans and stuff like that. I didn't feel right about like asking my parents for that money. And so I kind of just was like, there's no way I can even afford this, even if I got accepted. So I kind of just like the application, deadline, I just blew it off. Like it came and went. And because I was doing final portfolio, I was designing, I had another internship that final year with a local designer, Michael Newhouse, incredible designer. And I was designing the literary journal for my school because I was an English minor. And
you're very busy.
I was busy that year.
Finding a place to raise $2,000 in the middle of that is going to be really tricky.
So I blow off the application, and then like, a week later, I get an email from John, and he's like, hey, I've extended the deadline, just letting you know in case you decide you want to apply. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it comes down to like the night of the deadline, and I'm printing my final portfolio. Like I have, had like this high-end Canon inkjet printer, and I'm like, I had finally finished laying out the final portfolio for this, for my final portfolio class, and we had to make like a physical portfolio book.
Oh, sure.
And so I'm printing the pages. And so I end up with like, an hour or so where like I don't actually have anything to do. I'm just waiting on the printer before I can bind this thing. And so I'm like just kind of sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should like do that application for Project M, just so that I can tell Christian that I did it, so that he doesn't like hassle me.
Yeah.
And it was mostly just like kind of a question thing, but there was, and I don't remember what the questions were or whatever, but there was one of the prompts was, it just said, draw nothing. And I remember my answer for that because I drew my wallet and with a giant arrow pointing at the wallet. And
wow.
and sent it off to John. And that was probably like a Wednesday or something. And so then John responds and he's like, hey, let's do a phone call. And so this is on a Friday morning. And I remember this because like I also ran the like design club, and like every Friday we had like a lunch hangout session thing at a bar across the street from the art building. And so that Friday morning, I have this phone call with John, and this is the first time I've ever talked to him, not over email, And so he's just sort of explaining to me what Project M, is and what it's about. And I'm just like becoming increasingly excited and interested in hearing him speak about it, and just being like, oh, like this, I really do need to do this. This is, but I tell him, I'm just like, very honestly, I'm like, yeah, I don't really have the money to do it. He's like, well, there's probably a way we can, figure that out or whatever. And so, but nothing, is resolved in that phone call. I hang up the phone. Within 5 minutes, I'm just like, I can raise the money. And this is before Kickstarter, is a thing. I go to lunch, with these friends, and I'm like talking about it more, and I'm like, yeah, I think I really want to do this. And like the idea really begins to kind of like gel. And by that night, I put together a website that explains who I am, what Project M is, why I want to do it. And I have these, with PayPal, you could make like a link that would like, for a certain amount, So I made these buttons for $25, $50, $75, and $100 that would like do like a PayPal to my PayPal account with the promise that anyone who donates $25 or more will get a limited edition screen printed poster after my Project M experience is over, informed by my experience.
This really is like a Kickstarter.
Yeah, yeah.
Like...
This is a Kickstarter before Kickstarter. And so like I then like basically Facebook is a thing at this point. You know, I also set up a Facebook page there. I basically like contact and email this thing to every person I've ever met.
Wow.
And it gets picked up on some like design blogs back then, like K10K. I don't know if you remember, you know.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And some other stuff like that. I think by Saturday night, I've raised $2,000.
Wow.
So like within 24 to 48 hours, I've raised $2,000. I end up raising like $7,000. So it covers all my expenses. I did not really think about how much it was going to cost to mail all the posters to people either. So like it ended up covering those costs. So like it all got used for appropriate types of things. But yeah, it was incredible response from just sort of the internet design community.
That is remarkable that like you were able to get people to show up and like really, I mean, this is still like kind of the tail end of the era too, where people are like nervous about spending money online in any way, shape or form.
Yeah. This is 2007.
Yeah. I think fully it was 2012 before my dad made any purchases on the internet at all.
Yeah.
He was so nervous about it. Like he would read his credit card number over the phone to companies.
Oh, that seems way more sketchy to me.
There's never been any way to, hear what people are talking about on the phone. What? Impossible. But yeah, like that's incredible. So you are getting to go to Project M. What do you end up doing while you're there? Like
that session, it was the first one because Project M up to that point had moved around and continues to kind of like move around and be in different iterations. But we're actually in Greensboro, Alabama, which is where the Rural Studio operates.
Hey.
Hosted by this incredible woman, Pam Dorr, who ran like this nonprofit organization down there helping get people into like affordable housing. And what we ended up finding out is like in this county, Hale County, Alabama, that roughly 1/4 of the population didn't have access to clean running water in their homes.
Oof.
And that translated to roughly 990 families. And
wow.
And we were just like, wait, what? Like,
yeah,
you hear about this kind of thing in the developing world, but like, in the United States, and it's primarily it was along racial lines. There was still like, deep issues of sort of segregation and stuff.
Yeah.
So we focused in on the water meter. Like the problem was like even for most of these people who weren't connected, it wasn't that they couldn't afford the monthly water bill, which was almost nothing. It was that they couldn't afford the one-time cost for the county to come out and dig a trench from the main to their home or trailer and install a water meter. And that cost was $425.
Oh, that's so much lower than I even would have thought it is.
But like that was enough for it to be prohibitive for these people. And so we created this, we got a local newspaper printer to print this piece that we designed to raise awareness of this issue. And we made T-shirts that just said 425 that we sold for $425 each.
Hey!
And we ended up raising, I want to say somewhere between like $40,000 and $50,000.
Do you feel like your experience raising the money to go to Project M is like also informing this fundraiser too? Like
it definitely is. And there was like, I mean, I'm still great friends with like a lot of the people that were other student participants.
Yeah.
And one in particular that I've like collaborated with countless times since. I had this perspective that I think was a bit more unique than the other participants, and that I was like, I felt a responsibility sort of to my investors. I was like, I pitched this, in a way that like we're going to do something that's going to, be a positive benefit. And so I was very much, like we have to do something that has like a measurable impact. It's like, it's so interesting to me. Like I've always felt like I've had one foot in each world of these, like when I was in design school, I was the computer nerd guy. When I'm, at Facebook, I'm the weird art kid. Like, and like at Project M, I'm the one who's like, we need metrics and data. And when I'm, in a tech company, I'm like, you guys need to stop looking at the numbers and just like trust your gut.
Too arty for the nerds, too nerdy for the artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's been sort of a running thing throughout my career. But like I definitely, was like, we need to have some measure or some metric that we can say that we can like measure our impact. And, raising a certain amount of money is a easy one.
And like what a direct impact you get to have on people's lives. Like, I mean, those families, their lives get changed by having drinking water. Like that doesn't go away.
Yeah. And so we gave that, that money went to Pam, to the organization she was in charge of, which is called HERO, Hale County Empowerment Organization, something like that. And they dispersed those funds.
So like that's a really powerful thing to be doing, like right out of school. What do you end up doing next now that you kind of have that under your belt?
So that was the summer after I graduated. And like, Christian, had told me like, hey, we're not going to be able to hire you.
Oh.
And so like I graduated in May, and then Project M is June. And so then July, basically I moved back to my parents' house, had to move out of like the house that I was in with like roommates in college, and build my portfolio website to go job hunting. And so then all of August, I had went to New York and Philadelphia and Seattle. I can't remember if I went anywhere else. Those are the main ones. Oh, maybe Boston.
Like literally showing up to places and
like emailing. Yeah. Like
wow.
Going, having a physical book, but also like emailing the website, but like going, interviewing, like met with like Armin Witt when he was at Pentagram and,
wow.
Because of the Project M thing, like there were people like him who had like become aware of me and my work that I was able to go and meet with.
Not a lot of, new junior designers have a press section of their resume.
Yeah. So it was, I got to go, Chicago, like I went to VSA and,
Wow. You really are
all
over.
So like I was kind of, say this somewhat facetiously and maybe I was a little too cocky, but like, I kind of was like collecting job offers. Like I was really fortunate. Like I had quite a few job offers after I graduated, and I was in Seattle, sleeping on a friend's couch while I was like, job hunting there. And I get a phone call from Christian, and, this is kind of like midway through this, month long, job hunt. And I remember going and sitting on my like friend's little like deck terrace thing, taking this call. And Christian's like, hey, like, because I had told him what I'm doing, because like they told me they weren't going to be able to hire me. And so I had like hit him up for like contacts, like who can I talk to in New York? And,
Oh, yeah.
And so, he gives me a call and he's like, hey, we really would like to hire you. I know you're doing this thing, so we don't need an immediate decision. But just, here's what our offer is. Here's what we could afford to do. And it was the lowest paying offer of all the offers that I had coming out of school. And I didn't accept right then, but I knew in my heart, like I was just like, yep, that's what I'm going to do.
They came back to you.
So
the engagement's back on.
So after that job hunting experience, I came back and was like, all right, accepted the job with Dakota Ring. I had to ask them for a $1,000 advance on my salary so that I could afford to actually move, because I had $2.85 in my bank account.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Traveling all over the country is going to do that to you. Yeah.
So I have a screenshot of my bank account at that moment.
At least it's in the black still.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I had student debt.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so
yeah.
like.
Best not to think about that. Found.
Ooh. So yeah. So they, they gave me $1,000 advance on my salary. I moved to Austin. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I ended up working there for 1 year. It was my dream job coming out of school. There were 4 partners and me.
Yeah. And
then, we had another intern or 2 throughout that time as well. Getting to work on, I was like just kind of thrown into like, all right, you're running this project and you got to go figure out the press check and you got to pitch it to the client and convince them, to do the thing that you want them, that you think they should do, which was a whole other learning experience.
Well, yeah.
In that first year. Like I said, my dream job coming out of school, I was not looking for another job, not looking to leave. But one night I log into Facebook, and in my newsfeed, I see a targeted advertisement saying Facebook is hiring designers. And I had been using Facebook since it launched at UNT in 2004. So this is 2008.
You were part of the period when it was exclusive to colleges.
Oh, yeah. You had to sign up. It was the only thing I ever used my official student email address for was signing up for Facebook.
See, students, there is a good point to official student emails.
It's literally the only thing I ever used it for. I had to figure out how to log into it just to sign up for that. Anyway, so yeah, I applied through through this targeted ad.
Yeah.
And
which is pretty wild to
think
about.
Totally wild. Because up to this point, when I clicked on that ad, like I said, I had been using Facebook for 3 to 3.5 years at that point. I got a lot of value out of it, but I definitely didn't think very highly of it from an aesthetic or design standpoint. I had heard of who Mark Zuckerberg. I had heard the name Mark Zuckerberg because I used to read Slashdot. That's another throwback. When they launched Newsfeed in 2006, and there was this whole blowback.
I can't privately post on people's walls anymore. Yeah. That is the wild, folks who are young enough to not remember this. There was a period where there was not a thing that you saw when you went onto Facebook.
Yeah, it was just a welcome, and then you would go to different people's profiles, and you could write on their wall, and
that was the only way that you could interact.
But there was
with
no
them.
Centralized sort of aggregation of the news feed was totally invented by Facebook.
Yeah,
and they got a lot of initial. There was a lot of blowback when they launched it, but they're a company that is sort of obsessed by the metrics and the data, and they could see, even though people are complaining about it, the numbers are going like this. And so they rightfully, weathered the storm. But I knew, I had read Mark Zuckerberg's name because of that, because of that sort of news story. But I didn't know where they were located. I didn't know how big the company was. I didn't know anything about it. So I click on this ad. I start reading, and the more I'm reading, the more I'm just this seems like an interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I applied that night on a whim, and I don't remember how, the timing, but from applying to job offer was probably about a month or something like that, a couple weeks to a month. And then, after I got the offer and accepted, I was moving, again within a couple weeks to a month.
Ooh.
Born in Oklahoma, but raised in Texas my whole life. And so was moving to California across the country for the first time. So
it
was a big deal, big move. And
a very different thing than this
very different. And this is another thing that I do think has changed for the better. But back then, there was this huge stigma around working in-house at a design, as a designer. That's where you went, to kind of end your career, or if you just
intentionally in some cases, because it's that's the retirement plan. How it was always
and
framed
so,
to me.
People that I went to school with, who knew me as this, person who's designing screen prints and all this stuff. They're what are you going to do there?
Yeah.
And John Bielenberg, who started Project M, he, I talked with not Christian because he was my boss at the time, but Michael Newhouse, who I had interned for, and John Bielenberg, who I did Project M with, I had gotten their advice before, accepting the job. They both were this doesn't make sense. But, and John told me afterward, years later, John was visiting me at Facebook, and he was just he's oh, I thought you were committing career suicide.
Wow. Rough.
And,
boy.
And so, but I was just I was no, this just feels like the right opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is a lot of people that I went to design school with, it's oh, everybody wanted to go work at Apple. If they wanted to work in-house, it was Apple or Nike or, these companies that have, they have the design kind of figured out.
Yes.
They're known for having good design. And that was never interesting to me. I was I saw something like Facebook, which at the time was like pretty rough from an aesthetic standpoint. And I was like, that's the opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the person, I don't want to be designing, at a company like Nike where, to me, it's like bowling with those like bumpers in the lanes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like you can't, the formula is pretty figured out. You're going to do stuff that looks nice, but like you're going to be within this kind of like safe little zone. You can't really fail too much. And I was like, I want to work without a net kind of thing. I want to go somewhere, and I want to be the one who's like defining, the sort of systems that people are going to be coming into 10 years later and, kind of following.
Like your work will really get seen for what it is rather than, having to work in somebody else's framework and meet 1,000 layers of checks to decide what it will and won't look like. So like that's a huge thing to be realizing that early in your career too. Normally you kind of have to get one of those other jobs to kind of realize the freedom of that too.
I mean, I've said it a couple of times, like I was maybe cockier than I should have been, but like I just had I think I had this realization, one of the other like revelation moments that I had as a young, teenager in high school was listening to the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, sure.
And flipping through the liner notes booklet, that would come with the CD. And I just remember, seeing a photo of the band and just having one of those, realizations of just like, oh, these are people, which is like so obvious. Of course they're people, but like just putting sort of a face to like this music that I love.
Oh, yeah.
And just thinking, and so I just remember like having this kind of like an out of body experience type thing where like suddenly like I'm imagining the earth as a sphere and we're all like walking around on the surface of this sphere and we're all connected by the same resources of, water and air and that these people walking around on the sphere made this thing that I love. They have access to the same set of finite resources that I theoretically have access to, and they used it to make this thing.
Yeah.
Why can't I do that too?
Damn.
And so just like, that belief, and I think that's also why I've gravitated to, like art and design rather, I'm fascinated by science and technology and, math and stuff like that. But I remember in one of the later classes in design school was a publication class. We had to design like a CD, like an album, like a liner notes.
Oh, sure.
Thing,
yeah.
So I had to design like the cover and the liner notes booklet and all that. And I got assigned Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. I am not a fan of country music, but I was just like, okay, like I'm gonna, let's learn what I can about Bob Wills. And like, he's got, if you don't know his music, go listen to it. It's like old school country. And it's like, I forget what era, but it's like, I think I want to say like 30s, 40s, like old, really like pretty early. It's like, that's like, that's his thing. And so I come in, the next class and I'm like, and I've decided instead of a CD-ROM album for his work, I want to do like a collector's box of 7-inch vinyl records.
Oh.
Which is like basically fit like one song, I think, or on each side, or one or two songs on each side. And so it'd be like, a set of like 8 or something of these like records for the whole album. That's what I pin up on the wall and like pitch. And my professor's like, oh, that's great. Like, yeah, do that. And I remember my friend Ian in class, after class, was like, I didn't know we could do that. And I just remember saying, I was like, there's no rules, man. There's no rules with design. There's no wrong answer. Like, this isn't, design is like, it is subjective.
Yeah.
And so you have to bring your point of view, your vision, the way you think the thing should be done to it. And so I've just kind of had that mentality throughout my career. And even when I worked at Facebook, like I had this mentality through school. And so that was my portfolio. And again, being probably cockier than I should have been as a young designer, but I was just like, my work is the way it is because I have a strong point of view. They hired me because of my past work. I'm going to continue to operate that way and they can either accept that or they can fire me.
Damn. Okay.
And I always, like, I had maintained, my online portfolio, and I always thought about it as like, this is my insurance policy. Yeah. This is my, like, because I have this, I felt like I could go get a job anywhere. And, I don't have kids. I don't have those kind of responsibilities. And so I was just like, my only problem is just that I don't starve. And I'm like, I could go work at a Kinko's if I have to. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just, that was how I kind of have approached my whole career. It's just like, well, here's how I think it should be done. And I've been fortunate enough to find people who want that point of view.
Well, that also explains a lot about how you are able to do what you do at Facebook, including the Analog Research Lab. Like, what were sort of the early days of that job, especially coming into it with that mindset?
Yeah, I already talked about the election thing, you know, like a project that I just kind of invented the first week I got there.
It appears out of nowhere, essentially.
Like, it wasn't something that I was assigned to do. It was just like, why isn't this a thing? Well, go make it a thing. And like, Facebook really did embrace that kind of like initiative that, we talked about it as this like hacker culture.
Yeah.
And so it was a place that understood the value of that and allowed me to thrive in that way. Where, other companies could have not embraced that or shut that down. So I was very fortunate to be in that place that did embrace that. So they had, like, Facebook has these hackathon events.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
And, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's like it was at the time, it was like an all night thing. It would start at 7 o'clock at night and it would go till 7 a.m. We'd order a bunch of like Chinese food and there'd be a lot of alcohol. And it was a very collegiate kind of environment. And the idea was like, you can work, you're going to take the next day off. And so at the hackathon, it's like, work on something that is not your day job. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the only rule, was like, you can't work on normal work. You have to work on some idea you have, something that you think Facebook should be doing, or some feature or whatever. And it started with like the engineers and product designers, but it kind of like became, part of the whole company. And so we did a hackathon we had like an election hackathon. And so, as I'm designing, all that stuff, I also design like the t-shirt. I design t-shirts and graphics for that hackathon. And so then, then at the next hackathon, I get, even more ambitious and we make more stuff. And eventually by, a couple hackathons later, we've moved to like a new building. And I was like, for this hackathon, instead of like having t-shirts, printed commercially, let's have that vendor just burn us the screens, because we didn't have the facilities to make our own screens. And then we'll just like screen print on whatever t-shirts people bring us.
Hey.
And so Everett Katigbach, who started on the same day as me at Facebook and was on the same team as me, he had a background in letterpress printing. He had worked at the Getty Museum doing exhibition design. And he and I just like kind of, clicked, and we were like, I get you. Like, we're, coming from this kind of print world, and, we're in this sea of, digital people, but we're going to make stuff. So he and I stayed up that whole hackathon, sent out, a notice to people like ahead of time, like, hey, bring me something you'd want printed on. We had different graphics at different times throughout the night.
Oh.
People could bring us, we screen printed, on t-shirts, on laptops, which I'm sure the IT department loves. We screen printed one Snuggie, and that was a big hit. And so that was like kind of the first like getting screen printing into the Facebook area. I brought in this little clamshell letterpress that I had bought. We used that for some things. And then my manager, Ben, who I mentioned, who now runs Designer Fund, one day I turned to him and I'm like, hey, Ben, like, if I buy there's a place in San Francisco called the Center for the Book, which is like a book arts.
Oh, yes.
Book arts place. And they were selling a guillotine paper cutter. And I had seen, a listing for that. And so I asked Ben, I'm like, hey, there's this paper cutter for sale. If I buy it, is it cool if I leave it here at Facebook? And he was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't think I showed him a picture of it. So
yeah, paper cutter does not maybe accurately describe the scale.
He was probably imagining, one of those little
plastic arm.
And this is like this, huge cast iron, thing.
Yeah.
It takes 4 people just to barely lift it.
Weighs 500 pounds.
Probably more than that even. And so I'm just like, okay, cool. And so I go and I rent a truck and I go to San Francisco, pick this thing up. They have to like forklift it out of the building that it's in and, just like pull up in my like Ryder truck to the loading dock at Facebook and, wheel this thing into and it sat there for probably a year in the middle of like Facebook engineering, this like giant guillotine paper cutter. I put a lock on it because I was worried someone's going to cut their hand off or something. If they're like,
well, lockout, tag out, as that's a good idea.
And so then we had moved into this building, 1601 California Avenue, right by Stanford there in Palo Alto. And we were already, even as we were like occupying that building, we already knew we were going to like outgrow it. And so we had already like gotten another space, a few blocks down the road that used to be a pharmaceutical equipment manufacturer. They made like centrifuges and stuff.
Oh.
And so there was like an office building, but then there was this huge kind of like warehouse space that was part of that as well. And the warehouse space, needed all kinds of like work on the roof. And like, so the plan was not to renovate that, was just to renovate the office part. And so Everett specifically, but I a little bit, had kind of gotten involved with the facilities team and helping collaborate with, the architects and stuff like that. So we toured the space and, talked about like, opportunities and things we could do. And then the other thing that Everett and I worked on in 2010 was the Facebook Developer Conference.
Oh, sure.
And so we designed all that. And so this was all kind of like happening at the same time. So through those connections on the facilities team, we were like, hey, there's all these like cool cabinets and tables and stuff that was like left there by this, pharmaceutical equipment manufacturer. It'd be cool if we could use some of that stuff, for the event space, just make it feel more like the vibe of our office. This like, cool old weird science-y equipment stuff.
Yeah.
And so we got keys to that warehouse space.
Which is damp and like...
It's not damp, but it's just like, it's not up to OSHA code. It's not, And so we start like, we kind of then, stage the stuff that we want for the conference, in that space. And then just like coordinate to have it trucked, to San Francisco for the event. But we also like for the 2010 developer conference, we had all these tables where we just got 4-foot by 8-foot sheets of plywood and again had a vendor burn screens and we screen printed all over those tables. We just like had them laid out in this huge warehouse, like 50 of these tables or 20 of them. I don't remember how many. And so then after the conference, all of that stuff came, we just didn't have anywhere else to put it. So we just had it brought back to that warehouse and we still had keys. And so then another hackathon starts and, the idea had already been kind of like brewing, but it's like, all right, let's set up a little like place where we can make our own screens. So I built an exposure unit. I built a washout booth. There was a janitor's closet in that building that I found that had a like sink that I could hook a hose to the power washer, but I had it draining to like one of those Home Depot orange buckets. And if I didn't pay attention, that bucket would fill up and over because I had to dump that into the sink and that was at the other end of the building from where we found this like space where that we could use as a dark room. And so I would like burn the screen in there, put it in a cardboard box, run down to the other end of the building, wash it out, and
then this big empty warehouse.
Yeah. And so we just kind of had this huge empty warehouse and like, where it's like, oh, we kind of need a fridge, for the photo emulsion. Oh, there's an old fridge from the old, it works. I don't know what they kept in here, like what kind of samples,
But, best not to think about that. I also designed training courses at one point for a university, and it was for the Department of Risk Management and Safety. One of the boxes that we were, just sort of bouncing around in a meeting once, it took me a long time to notice that on the side of it just said hepatitis. I presume that there's hepatitis in that box. We were just sort of setting drinks and stuff on it. So,
yeah.
Medical facilities.
Oh,
exciting.
Yeah. I'm still here. So, but
wow. But like I don't think I realized that the Analog Research Lab is just like happening not really intentionally. It's all just sort of being pieced together.
Yeah, it was
it was
not our job.
No.
It was not something we were asked to do. It just kind of grew organically out of our interest, our passion, this hacker culture.
Like you're solving individual problems.
And like there's bits and pieces of it. And then like once we once we had those capabilities to start actually burning the screens, and then we start making posters.
Yeah.
And that's when these like the red type posters emerged as one of the first things that I did there. And at the bottom, and the name of it also, the Facebook Analog Research Lab, is just like us being snarky and just this idea of like analog stuff inside this like tech company was something that we found amusing. And so at the bottom of the posters, in small type, it just said, brought to you by your friends at the Facebook Analog Research Laboratory. And we just start putting these up all over the walls in the office, But we did it like we would I would come in and I'd put them up like, on a weekend when no one's there. And so then on Monday, everyone would come in and there'd be all these like new posters and like, what the hell? And I was just like, I just got wallpaper paste and I was just like literally pasting them to the walls.
Wow. Okay.
And because the other thing that we knew was this building that we were occupying, we knew we were going to be like the last tenant. We knew that this whole area was slated to be redeveloped. So like there was a benefit to that of like Stuart Brand. And one of the many things that Stuart did is he wrote this book and he did this series for the BBC called How Buildings Learn.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he talks about in there is low road buildings. And like this was a low road building, basically like a building where there was kind of infinite freedom to be creative, to be weird, to make mistakes, to like do things like this. So another sort of like unplanned kind of benefit or thing that we benefited from.
Yeah.
And so, I would just like paste these things to the wall. And so then, of course, people's like, wait, what is this? Where, who is doing it? And eventually, people start to work out like, oh, that's Ben and Everett. And then people start like coming, to us and saying like, hey, why don't you do this poster or that poster? And my response to that was like, why don't you do it? And I'll show you how. And so I started teaching, these like workshops where I'd like you get your team together, get, 5 to 10 people together, come to the lab one evening with your idea. I'll show you how to burn the screens and we'll print that poster and then you all can go put them up. So that was a good way to kind of like both bring people in, show them the process, but also scale the distribution and sort of crowdsource ideas.
But that's wild. Like this has grown from just like filling a space accidentally to now you're doing training courses. And like, I assume that it's also not just designers at Facebook that are taking them, that it's probably like engineers and stuff too.
Oh yeah. No, most of the teams that would come would be like sales and accounting or the, the lawyers or the project managers the project managers were one of my favorite groups. Like
really?
Because they came in and, most streams, it'd be like, inevitably the squeegee would get dropped in the ink, every demo, like, and ink would end up everywhere. But the project managers, what I loved about them is like they organized themselves into an assembly line. And it was like one person was like pulling the squeegee, one person was raising the screen, one person was taking the paper out, another person was putting the paper. Like they were like optimizing it for efficiency just because that is who they are. And I was like, oh, this is amazing.
That's great. That is, I mean, I am imagining now the lawyers are screen printing things in triplicate just so they can be sure they have this contract.
But it was all different groups throughout the company that ended up coming through there and doing the classes.
Like at what point does it start to really become more of your job too? Like
it was never my job for the time that I was there, but it did become more legitimized. So then, we renovated that office building 1050 Page Mill, but then we already knew we were going to outgrow the space. And we also knew that like that one, I told you that whole area was slated to be redeveloped. Everett, by this point, Everett and I are working pretty closely with the facilities team on all this kind of stuff and helping them identify architects and then collaborating with the architects and sort of translating Facebook's engineering culture into, what are we going to actually physically build. Yeah. And so around this time, the head of facilities, Jim, who like decides he's going to retire. And so he hires like sort of his replacement, this guy, John. And John comes in, had much more corporate background, been at Cisco and all this kind of other stuff. And so he's getting, we know that this is happening. We know that this new person's coming in. We're not involved in like the hiring process or anything like that. And so the first couple days, he's just getting kind of like toured around all these spaces, and he gets toured through, building 2, where we have, set up this lab for a year or so at this point, just kind of makeshift. And so Everett and I get this email from John. And he's just like, hey, I'm the new, global head of global real estate or, blah, 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 at Facebook. I saw the stuff that you guys have set up and building too. What do you need? What do you want?
Wow.
And so, I think he knew that like we were going to be the ones that he was going to be collaborating with, but also, so he wanted to like make us happy, but also like he understood the value and the power of what we were doing immediately and helped support it. And so the first thing I was like, well, I would love to have running water in and could we get the electricity hooked back up in this part? And so they helped us, build out that space a little bit more in that warehouse and make it a lot nicer. And then, as we were, then we're looking for, where's Facebook going to move? And we ultimately ended up redeveloping the old Sun Microsystems campus. And so as we're designing, and redeveloping that whole thing, the Analog Lab got a sort of like prime real estate spot in that new campus.
That's incredible.
And so when we're renovating the Sun Microsystems campus, we decide that there's going to be 2 cafeterias because Facebook provides 3 meals a day for their employees. And
oh wow,
yeah, it's very, very nice. A great, amazing culinary team. We hire Gensler architects to design the overall campus, but we want to make these 2 cafe spaces really special and unique. So we decided we're going to hire specific architects different architects to design each one. So I guess I need to rewind a little bit. Like a year or 2 prior, Everett and I are in New York City for a conference, and we're staying at the Ace Hotel in Midtown Manhattan.
Oh, sure.
And which we had stayed at before when we'd been there for another event. It was like pretty recently opened, and we loved it. We loved everything about the aesthetic of it. And if you haven't been there, the lobby becomes sort of a bar at night, and it's just like kind of a hipster cool scene. So we're there one night, and we're like having a drink. We're standing there. It's like very crowded and like very loud. You can barely hear each other. It's not a great place to have a conversation. And I look across the room and I see Robin and Stephen, who are the husband and wife couple that run the architecture studio Roman and Williams. And they are the designers who designed the Ace. And I recognized them because I had seen a little video documentary interview about the design of the Ace. And so I'm trying to tell Everett, it's very loud. I'm like, dude, there's Roman and Williams. He thinks I'm saying there's Robin Williams. And
oh, wow. That's going to be different.
But then I'm like, no, Roman and Williams. But I couldn't remember their names. I just remembered the name of the studio.
Yeah.
And the name of the studio is like their mother's maiden last names, 2 last names or whatever, something like that. So, but I'm like, there's very few, like I don't really care about like celebrities or whatever, but it's like, this was like one of those moments where I'm like, we have to go talk to them and, and just kind of be fanboys and so we finally get up the nerve and we just like, they're talking to some other people, probably the owners of the hotel, or I don't know. And we like interrupt them and we're like, hey, I'm, really sorry, but like, you're the ones who like designed this place, right? And they're like, yes. And we're just like, oh, we love it. We're designers. We work at Facebook, like, da, da, da. And then, like, I don't remember what else. We didn't really say much else. It wasn't a long conversation.
Yeah.
But they were just like, oh, they were just like very gracious and like, I think we got their card or something like that. And so then, a year or so later, when we're starting to plan this design, redesign of the Sun Microsystems campus, we were like, we'd like to get Roman and Williams to design one of the cafeterias. We reach out to them and we hire them. And so then we get to like collaborate with them, which was amazing. So, they came out, kind of toured the space and like stuff like that. And then for the first big presentation that they're going to do, we're going to do it at their office in New York. So it's, Everett and I, and then this other designer, Aaron, who was the first designer at Facebook. We fly out there, but also like John, who I mentioned, the head of facilities, and like, Joseph and Dean, who are the 2 head chefs at Facebook are also. So it's like, a whole Facebook sort of like contingent going out there. And, Aaron, Everett, and I are on the same flight. And so Aaron's like, hey, I know like a great sushi place for dinner. Well, I guess we had to wait. We had drinks, waiting for a table at some other bar. Then we have drinks at the place. Then we have a drink afterwards.
Oh, no.
We get back to the hotel at like, 11 o'clock to midnight. We've already had like quite a bit to drink. And that's when we run into Joseph and Dean at the bar of the Ace. and they're so drunk that the bar won't serve them.
Wow. Okay.
So I don't know if you've ever drank with chefs, but like, don't do it.
Yeah.
But we're like, Aaron very wisely was like, I'm going to bed, guys. And so, okay, before I tell this next part, there was
That's always a good sign.
There was this game that started on Twitter, and I believe that the website is still up. I think it's like poopinrules.com or something like that. Google it. Don't put that address in, but like
poopinrules.com might be something really different than you're looking for.
But basically the game was you tried to get access to somebody's mobile phone unlocked and then go to either their Twitter or Facebook or both and then just post a one-word status update that just said poopin'.
Oh, sure.
And so that was the game. And you couldn't do it. There were like, there's rules. Like there's this website that has the rules of this game.
Yeah.
And so like you couldn't do it on desktop. It was mobile only. So it was very juvenile, like, very, yeah. This had been going on amongst the sort of like Facebook design team at the time. And so, the bar won't serve Joseph and Dean, but Everett and I are like, well, let's just go, to like somebody's room and like raid the mini bar. So we end up going to my hotel room and having a drink from the mini bar. People go to their rooms, bring back more alcohol, like, and at some point in the middle of the night, I'm so drunk that Everett has video of this, of me handing him my phone.
Oh no.
And watching him, get me. Like the only time I ever got, got.
You're volunteering it though.
But I don't know what he's doing, but I'm just so out of it. And yeah. And we, then all of a sudden we realize like the sun is coming up and we all scramble.
Oh no.
And I end up oversleeping and I'm late to the meeting.
Oh.
So hungover. We're all just a total mess. So, this is like the most unprofessional moment of my life so far. And hopefully ever.
Good to qualify, though.
Yeah. There's still time.
I certainly thought for me that I'd reached the low bar, and no, turns out no.
So everyone else made it to the meeting on time. Everett had like called me multiple times. He said he had like pounded on my door. And so I'm like, wake up like basically at the time that the meeting's starting and have to get like a couple subway stops away and get to their office. So I'm like 30, 45 minutes late to this like presentation meeting with these architects. And one of the chefs, I won't say who, is getting up every, 30 minutes during the meeting. And we find out later to like go puke in the bathroom. So we're all a mess.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that's the only time I ever gotten in the game of pooping.
That's that it has to be a very important and precise meeting with architects about important, probably nuanced details. That's not the condition you want to be in for that one.
They were very understanding, and we had dinner with the architects that night, and like told them like everything. That happened.
Okay.
And, they were very generous about it,
and they also knew that you had been pooping. So
I don't know if we told them that part.
The world knew, though.
Yeah,
everyone knows.
But I didn't delete the rule. The rule is if someone gets you, you can't delete it. So like, and I abided by that rule. It's still there somewhere on my Facebook profile.
So listeners, go back, find that moment when Ben was pooping. I hope no one does that to me. Because I think it would, at this point, it would be very weird if my Instagram just posted a blank photo with the caption pooping. Because I don't think there's a way to do a non-text post on that at all. Prove me wrong. Anyway. Also, since we're at this point of the story, I wanted to talk about one of the things, and I double-checked your portfolio today. Your team was responsible for the incredible reuse of the Sun Microsystem signs.
Yes.
Wayfinding.
Yes.
If you have not seen the Sun Microsystem sign on the backside of the Facebook entrance sign, it's one of my favorite things in the world.
So Facebook, yeah. So I'll tell that story real quick. Like the Facebook has always had this paranoia as a company culture. If you think about the history of like when it was founded, Friendster and MySpace had already preceded it, and then earlier things like 6 Degrees and stuff like that. But really, Friendster and MySpace that kind of kicked off the social media kind of craze in 2003.
Yeah,
and so Facebook was actually kind of like launched in 2004, so they're already coming on the heels of these other social networks, and they end up Friendster just can't scale and ends up kind of like dying pretty quickly. And then Facebook ultimately overtakes and sort of decimates MySpace.
Yeah. But even then, like the conversation is like these things last like 3 years. Basically.
Yeah, but like I think because of that, especially that experience, like there was just this like paranoia of like if we don't invent the thing that destroys us, like somebody else is going to do it. And so there was just this constant like questioning and sort of like willingness to make mistakes, to throw, things away, to like that nothing was precious.
Yeah.
When we were moving into this huge campus for the first time and renovating it, we were also very conscious of like there was this whole tech company, Sun Microsystems, that used to exist and be a big deal and like built this whole place.
A huge deal.
And like now they're, they got acquired and don't, just kind of subsumed into this other entity.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like we need to stay focused or someone else is going to be coming in here, in 5, 10, 15, 20 years and remaking this place again into whatever their thing is. And the idea, like it is, I also want to give credit to Robbie Panea, who was one of the people who worked on the facilities team, just this jack of all trades, had been an engineer on a submarine in the Navy.
Wow.
And just could like, like really helped us, like fabricate stuff, build stuff. Like, and so actually he and one of his teams, before we had even moved into the Sun Microsystems campus when it was still sort of a construction site, he actually just like made a vinyl banner with the like thumbs up graphic that I had drawn and like just put that over the Sun Microsystems as sort of a temporary thing. And so it was in part because of that thing that he did. And then I saw that, I was like, that's awesome. Let's just do that for real. And like,
wow.
And take the sign. The sign is symmetrical.
Yeah.
And so I was like, can we just pick it up, rotate it 180 degrees, bolt it back down, and then hire sign painters to paint on the backside the thumbs up. And so that's what we did.
Wow. I've told students about that in the past, and I think I've always framed it around just scrappiness of like, it's like getting something done using the tools that you already have, which like definitely is part of.
That's part of it, but it definitely was more. It wasn't that we didn't have the money to like make a new beautiful sign. We absolutely could have.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily about like saving money. It was much more about making that point of this used to be somebody else's house.
Yeah.
And if we don't stay focused, we'll lose it too.
It's memento mori. It's like, wow.
It's sort of honoring who was here before, but also reminding ourselves to like stay focused.
Yeah. So you're now at the Sun campus. Like you have a purpose-built essentially facility for the Analog Research Lab.
I mean, we moved into that campus in 2012. The lab didn't actually open until early 2013. So like we were still like the construction, like was kind of phased, like certain buildings came online before others. We also had some issues with the city inspectors and I think
that's bound to happen.
Yeah. So there were just like delays. Like we had to have like, 2 or 3 hour like fire rated doors installed and, like just crazy stuff. And I think they also got upset with us because we also started this artist in residency program. And because we didn't have the space for them yet to work in terms of the lab, we set up some shipping containers in the courtyard. For them to work out of. And the city inspectors, I think, were not happy at all about that.
No, I would think that there's some safety concerns around a shipping container that's only lockable from the outside.
So, yeah, I think it officially opened in like February or March of 2013. I took a sabbatical starting in April of 2013, came back 6 months later at the end of 2013, and quit at the end of, or at the very beginning of 2014 was my last day at Facebook.
Wow.
So I really didn't get to use the lab at that proper space. So that was really like Scott Baums and Jez Burrows and those folks that kind of like got to benefit from that space that we had built.
Shout out past guest Jez Burrows.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the show Frasier.
Oh, of course.
But like I always think like the last episode, he's like his father moves out, like he changes the chair and he like kind of steps back and looks at and like everything is like just kind of perfectly the way he wants it, and he's like, all right, I'm moving. and I think like that's kind of how I felt with the lab. It was like, all right, I got it to this place, and now it's time for me to like go do something else.
Yeah, just make sure you don't come back for a legacy reboot 20 years later to Facebook. But like, I mean, that's an incredible, and I think that's also the like interesting perspective you must get from like being able to step away from a place and then come back and be like, oh, actually, I maybe have grown past this, or I want to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of. The Analog Lab was never my job.
Yeah.
Like it was not the thing I was hired for. It was just always kind of like this side project that like I, had helped build into this thing. And I'm very proud of that. And I loved doing that. But, while I was on sabbatical, Facebook hired like this new CMO, and like they were kind of reshaping, into like a more traditional kind of advertising agency model. I had been getting wind of these changes while I was away traveling and stuff. Came back into that and was like, had a bunch of meetings with this new CMO, seeing like, how if at all I could kind of fit into this new org, because the thing, I could have probably stayed there, doing the Analog Lab for a long time and been, it would have been fine. But the thing that I was always really interested in trying to address is that I used to invite people all the time to come have lunch, while I was there, some designers in town or whatever. It's like, come have lunch. I'll show you around. Yeah. And I watched over and over people who had like a negative opinion about Facebook from because of their external experience with the product or the company. I watched their opinion change, through the course of like an hour, lunch and sort of tour. Seeing the passion, the energy, the excitement, the like what people were doing.
Yeah.
This is obviously all before the 2016 stuff and all that. And so I was always like, there's this disconnect. There's this gap between the internal perception and sort of reality of the company and how it is perceived externally.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in like, how can we communicate more authentically? Because it's like internally it's like, this is, at the time especially, it's like, this is the first time in human history where we've like connected this many people.
Oh yeah.
Like we're not going to get it right. We're not going to, like we are experimenting, we're iterating, and I just think that like there was, I don't think Facebook ever has gotten their external marketing done very well. And so that was what I was really interested in, like trying to tackle, was like, how can we close that gap? How can we communicate externally more authentically as a company? And it just became clear pretty quickly through a series of meetings with like the new CMO and his sort of staff, where it was just like, all right, like I'm either going to be like the grumpy old man in the room who's just like, this is not the Facebook way. Or I can sort of like step aside and go do something else and let these people who have been tasked with this do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I was just like, made that decision that it was time for me to step away.
That's a hard thing to do when the vision just doesn't
match
up.
It was a very emotional, I mean, I remember like the meeting that I was in, where I was just like, midway through the meeting, I was like, yep, it's time for me to go. And I just like left that meeting and like walked out the door. There's this trail around the bay. And I just remember like walking out there and like breaking down and crying.
Yeah.
And just like, I had put a lot of my 20s into like helping build this place. And I'm still very proud of that place and that time. But yeah, it was the right decision at the time.
God, to be realizing that in real time in a meeting, too is like fucking rough.
I mean, I had obviously like during the sabbatical, I had like thought a lot about, I had taken the time off to travel, but I had also been thinking, like, because when I took the job, part of it was there's, here's your compensation, but there's this equity, which when I took the job was like worthless. But there's this
Facebook
like
bucks.
There's this like vesting schedule, and it's like a 4-year sort of like vesting schedule.
Yeah.
And so I just like, when I took the job again, kind of what I said earlier, I was like, I kind of mentally, I was just like, all right, I'm going to do this for at least 4 years, not because of the money, but just, I was like, that's like a college, kind of experience, that's a good time period to like invest yourself. And that was, again, ties back to that mentality of like, I'm going to do it my way. They can either accept it or they can fire me. And so I had like a, sort of, this list of goals in my head. And at that point, when I took the sabbatical, it was like 4.5, 5 years, something like that into my time, having accomplished most of the things that I had set out to, it was like, if I'm going to stay here, I want to mentally like re-up for like another 4-year run. What are the goals for that? And that getting to that, trying to address that gap that I was talking about. And when it became clear that there wasn't a clear path to do that, then I had also been thinking during the sabbatical, like, if I left, what's the plan? Do I want to go work at another company, another tech company, And I had lots of friends who had gone to, Dropbox and Pinterest and Airbnb, and like nothing against those companies. I think they're all great companies, but like I was not interested in going and working full time on those companies, those products. They just didn't capture my imagination in the same way that Facebook and then eventually OpenAI did. And so like I was just like, okay, I had already during my sabbatical made the decision, if I don't stay at Facebook for another 4 to 5 year run, then I'm going to start my own independent practice. And so I had lunch with a bunch of friends, Carl de Torres and Jessica Heish and Brent Couchman, et cetera, and just kind of picked their brains on like how you've kind of set up this like small, design studio, independent practices or whatever, getting their advice in doing that. So I already had kind of like mapped out, there was like the moment when the decision was made was in that meeting.
Yeah. But then it's real.
Yeah.
So you're like stepping out on your own. Like, what does that start to look like?
So I also decided, I was like, well, I'm just going to move to New York.
Hey, well, that's a great way to really draw a line between two periods in your life.
So January 2nd, 2014 was my last official day at Facebook. And January, or like I think either the 3rd or the 4th, I like flew into New York.
This like really is like the last episode of Frasier.
The day after a huge blizzard.
Yeah.
And so I remember the doors of the airport opening and just being blasted by cold air and just being like, what have I done? And I had rented an Airbnb for a month in Brooklyn, and I was like, all right, if I don't find an apartment in the month, then like I'm not gonna move to New York. But I found an apartment, so then I ended up, going back, packing up my place in SF and moving to New York for almost 2 years.
And
so I started my sort of like independent consulting practice. The first year was I didn't make money, but I didn't lose money.
Hey, that's better than I'm doing.
And it definitely, thankfully I had some savings and some cushion at that point. But it definitely took me a couple years. I mean, the first big project where I like build a reasonable rate, still low compared to where I'm at now, but was in 2015. So about a year exactly after I kind of had gotten things going, and that was Figma.
Oh, sure, yes.
And so this was, when Dylan and Evan and like, I think they had 4 or 5 employees, and they were still in stealth, in this tiny little office near downtown Palo Alto.
And so the idea of the kind of tool that Figma is too is like Sketch is barely a thing at that point.
Sketch had been around for a couple years. It had kind of started to get some traction with the product designers.
Yeah. Sketch is basically a Mac only Figma type tool, but really Mac only, built for Mac.
Not collaborative.
No.
I mean, I haven't looked at it in years. I assume it's still a thing, but yeah, I mean, it was very quick. I mean, it was very clear meeting them, like, oh, this is a crazy talented team. Yeah. I still remember the first time I met Evan, because like I went and like spent like a week at the beginning of the project, just kind of like hanging out with the team and kind of getting to know them. And I remember when I met Evan, and I'm just like, yeah, so like, tell me the story of, why you're starting this, what's your background? And he's just like, well, I studied computational photography in college. And I'm just like, what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah, what is that? It sounds serious.
Yeah. And so he starts, takes out his computer. He starts showing me all these little like prototypes that he's built that are on his website. At least it was when I last looked a couple years ago. Just these like incredible, like basically like Photoshop type filters and stuff, like manipulating images in a computationally using computers to manipulate graphics. Just, operating on another level from most of us.
So how do you end up with design wireframing tool from that? I guess that's where the collaboration comes in, and that's what they're all about ultimately. Yeah. But like, so you designed their logo, like
they're not their current one. They changed it a year or two after they launched. So the one that I designed their logo that they launched with,
which is a beautiful mark, by the way.
It was nice, but like I understand, and we tried to, even when I was working on it, we were trying to come up with like an app icon. There were lots and lots of iterations. There were other names even for what Figma was going to be.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There's tons of stuff there. And
this is really, so you're there at the ground level.
Oh, yeah.
Like truly.
The product kind of exists, but it's like it's really rough. I mean, they have like the basics of the vector editing stuff. But I, was starting to kind of use it. So I was like giving, feedback on the product. So like, some of the keyboard shortcuts that are still there are thanks to me.
Hey, that's a pretty big get, being in the early days still of like being on your own. At what point does OpenAI, I guess, start to get into the picture?
So OpenAI started as a client towards the end of 2016 and was working. They had one in-house designer, Ludwig Pedersen, incredible, sort of like, I don't know how to describe him. Like he's a developer, like sort of front-end designer. So he had worked at Stripe. So if you remember all those beautiful old Stripe marketing pages, and that was all Ludwig. And Greg Brockman, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, was an early employee at Stripe. And so he knew Ludwig. And so he had brought Ludwig over. And I got connected to Ludwig through a mutual friend because Ludwig wanted to redo the brand. They had a logo that was designed by Louis Manatia,
who is also here.
He was here. I don't think he is anymore. I've never actually met him in person, but it was a nice mark. But like there was no symbol, and like it didn't quite fit with where Ludwig kind of wanted to take things. So, but Ludwig, he's like I'm not a brand designer, so I need help. So like he got connected to me, and so then we started collaborating and just had a really fruitful collaboration. Launched the sort of new website and brand and everything in early 2017. And I continued to then kind of like work with them because like one of the things that Ludwig had the idea for was like for each, there was no product, there was no ChatGPT, there was no, like it was a research organization.
It's like purely theoretical, basically.
Pure research, very academic. And so their output were these academic white papers. And so what Ludwig was like, for the significant papers that we publish, I want to treat them, I want to kind of create like a book cover or a poster, artwork. And I was like, I'm all about that.
You've come to the right place.
And he really wanted, I actually proposed like, let's just do a word mark. But he was like, I really want a symbol. And so like we spent a lot of time, trying to figure out what the symbol. We came up with this like blossom, with the sort of hexagon at the center that has survived now multiple attempts to kill it. But and sometime in late 2017, Ludwig's like pings me and he's like, hey, can we have a quick call just to kind of check in on things? And so, and then he tells me, he's like, hey, I'm leaving OpenAI to go do my own startup. And I was like, oh man. At the time I was living here. I had a full-time designer working with me, a really talented designer who's still here, Regan. and I had a part-time sort of studio manager, and they were absolutely like the best employees I feel like I could have ever asked for, but it also stressed me out. Like, just, I'm glad I did that sort of experiment and like, but like running a studio in that way. So when Ludwig told me this, I was just like, oh man, like OpenAI was one of the most exciting things I had gotten to work on and was excited about, like, but the brand was still like at this very nascent stage. And so I was like, what's the plan? Are they going to try to hire someone to replace you? I was worried if they got the wrong person in there, that all the work that we did could kind of just like go off the rails.
Oh, sure.
And so in sort of thinking about this, after a day or two, I was just like, I pinged Ludwig and I was like, hey, if there's an opportunity, like I'm interested in sort of like being, your replacement if they want to have that conversation. And so that led to like me talking, more with Greg and then ultimately joining at the very beginning of 2018. I started full time at OpenAI. It was like, especially at the beginning, it was important to me just to like get to know the organization, get to, be able to meet the researchers, know what's going on, make those sort of interpersonal connections. So like for most of 2018, it was like 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks, which was like very disjointed because I was happy living here. And then in 2019, I bought the house that I have now. So that was part of why I ultimately left, was just knowing that the team needed to grow and trying to be unselfish, knowing that like, because I wasn't there in the office full time, that it really wasn't the responsible thing for me to be the person to build that team.
I mean, that makes sense. And it's also like, that is getting very close to ChatGPT at that point. And I left in April 2020.
So it was still a couple years. When was ChatGPT?
I want to say it's 21.
Is it late 21? But all of those things, that are now powering, sort of ChatGPT were in, sort of the research stages were happening. And I was seeing that. And there was a period of years where I would have these conversations with friends, like in that, 2016, 2017 timeframe. And I'd just be like, this shit is coming, you got it, like it's, and like, I could just see in their eyes, like, Ben is lost it. He's talking this like science fiction, like nonsense.
There's a storm on the horizon. I can feel it in my knees.
Yeah. It's like, but I could see what was happening with the research. I could see what was happening in OpenAI's lab, but also just like was paying attention to the research that the researchers there were paying attention to from all the other labs, and was just sort of thinking about the implications of this type of technology, I think, a little bit earlier than, and part of the thing that I was really interested in the time there, and my manager became Jack Clark. And one of the things, Jack is really focused on like policy, and how do we, coordinate with governments to like, get regulation and stuff around this. And one of the things, while I was working there, was like, it was, the goals is like, want to help, sort of explain and popularize this research, but also, I was concerned, and I think the organization was concerned, like this needs to be a larger discussion that society is having.
Yeah.
And like nobody was taking this stuff seriously back then. And so I think just too, by like helping to talk about this stuff, to promote these ideas, to get this research out there and publicized, be outside of the like AI researcher bubble, I do think helped start that, conversation. And I'm I think there's a lot of frustrating sort of like talking past one another, but at least there's much more awareness in society. I mean, partly just because these tools are so much more powerful, but I do think we need to be having serious discussions. And
yeah, oh, absolutely. There is incredible technological potential to make our lives easier, but also incredible technological potential to make our lives worse. And that is a level of tool that we have not had for a while, new and deployed on this kind of scale.
And the thing, one of the things that I think about a lot is just like, we're not at this place yet, but like we're talking about potentially creating something that replaces us at the top of the food chain, because ultimately we are all competing for energy from the sun. Yeah. And we get that energy through the plants and the animals that we eat that ate the plants. And AI is already like, there's like this huge power problem. Like it's, we need more power to power these models. And like, so, but like ultimately that is the source of the energy that we have in this, on this planet.
Yeah.
And is it wise to invent the thing that replaces you at the top of the food chain? I don't know.
Is it wise to invent the robots in the Matrix before the robots take over? But we get to be in the pods, the big goo pods, and then live in the simulation, and that's fun.
Sure.
I think. Maybe it's not. I did like the thing in the Matrix movies where I think in the later ones they talk about like they tried other versions of the simulation as somewhere like just like night times and stuff like that. Why don't we get that one? I would love that one. Please give me something silly.
No.
No? Oh, well.
I don't want to deal with like the Black Death or.
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you so much for being on, Ben. If people want to find more about you, like where can they go to do it?
benberry.com is my main website. Nonlinear.co is the studio website. I have a little blog thing where I publish media that's related to science and technology called Active Matrix, and the activematrix.io is the website for that. These are all like linked off of benberry.com though.
And you also have links to your prints and your book.
Yeah, I have a little online store, Carl. It's particular.co that I actually just redid the website for recently, and hope to have some new products soon. But right now there's the book and like 2 other things.
Yeah, Ben brought in 100 Patterns, which is a gorgeous offset printed book of absolutely beautiful patterns. 100 of them, I would guess.
There's actually 101.
What?
I know.
I hereby take you to court for false advertising.
This is Paul Fuchek, who taught me how to screen print at Decoder Ring. He would always number one print outside of the edition, and I always thought it was hilarious, and have continued that in my own prints and in this book. So.
What a very specific printmaking goof. I love it. Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah,
also, hey, thank you out there to all the listeners. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this show wherever you heard it. I can't stress enough how important ratings and reviews are, especially on like Apple Podcasts. But, if you really want to help out, and you go share this show with a friend, because that's an easy way to do it too. Also, you can visit our freshly redone Did I Do That .design website, and hopefully I will have all the bugs worked out by the time that you look at it. This has been Did I Do That? I'm Sean Schumacher, and as we say at the close of every episode,
hello world.
That's what we always say. Okay, bye!